Once upon a time, in a green and lush forest, there lived a little bird. He was smaller than all the other birds, so he always felt like he didn't belong. All the other birds teased him, saying that he was the most timid bird in the entire forest, and they weren't wrong. If a leaf fell from a tree nearby, he would get startled and his heart would beat really fast. He would flap his wings frantically and fly up high as fast as he could. Even the sound of flowing water or the buzzing of an insect would make him super nervous. That's why the other birds made fun of him and called him the scaredy cat bird. Now this little bird had a nice and cozy nest on top of a tall tree where he would go every evening to sleep. But one evening a fierce and angry storm hit the forest. The wind started blowing very hard, and the rain poured down in buckets. It seemed like the storm would never end. As soon as the storm started, all the birds flew to their nests and closed their eyes tight, hoping that the scary noises would go away soon. Meanwhile, under a tree by the river, there grew a tiny sapling. It had grown weak because of the harsh winter, and now the heavy rains threatened to wash it away. As the wind began to pick up, the young tree started trembling. It looked around desperately for some support, but there wasn't a single creature around who could help. Then it saw a big, strong root of an old tree nearby, and it hoped with all its might that someone would come and save it. The other birds in the forest were watching the storm from their cozy nests. They saw the poor young tree struggling in the wind and the current, but they didn't want to go outside in such bad weather. Each bird thought to himself, "It's too dangerous out there. What if I get hurt?" One bird said loudly, "Who wants to go and save that tree? It's so dangerous out there. I won't do it." Another bird agreed, saying, "I don't think anyone can help that tree. It's just too risky. I'm going back to my nest." And each bird repeated the same thing until the last bird said, "No one wants to go out in the storm. I guess that tree is doomed." And right then, our little bird peeked out of his nest. He was also afraid to go outside. But when he saw that all the other birds were scared, and no one wanted to help the young tree, he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. He knew that even though he was small and scared, he had to try to help the young tree. As he prepared himself to go out into the raging storm, his heart pounded like a drum. He thought to himself, "What if I get swept away by the strong winds? What if I fall into the river? What if I can't save the tree?" But no matter how scared he was, he knew he had to be brave. So taking a deep breath, he flapped his wings hard and flew straight into the wind and rain. Our little bird flew very close to the ground, because where the wind and rain were strongest. He struggled to keep his balance as the wind tried to push him off course, but he held on tight to his course. He needed to reach that young tree before it was too late. After what felt like hours, although it was only a few minutes, he finally reached the young tree. He flew in circles around the tree, trying to figure out what he could do to help. He was just about to give up hope when he saw a long, loose vine hanging from a bush nearby. Quickly, he grabbed the vine in his beak and flew back towards the river. As he approached the tree, he saw that the wind and the rain had made the soil soft and muddy. Using his sharp beak, he made a small hole in the mud, just enough to fit the tip of the vine through. Then, with all his strength, he pushed the vine through the hole. But the wind was so strong that it kept pulling the vine away from the tree. Our little bird struggled to hold on, but his grip was getting weaker and weaker. Just when he thought he might lose his balance and fall, something amazing happened. The tip of the vine caught onto a small rock in the mud, giving him support to tie the vine securely around the tree. He continued pulling the vine, trying to tie it to the strong old tree root that the young tree had seen earlier. But the wind kept whipping around him, making it harder and harder to tie the vine. Still, he didn't give up. Finally, after what felt like forever, he managed to tie the vine from the bush to the old tree root. Then with a final push, he secured the knot tightly. Then suddenly the wind changed direction. The little bird lost his balance and fell into the muddy water. He struggled to free himself from the sticky mud, but it was no use. He was stuck. Just when he thought everything was lost, the young tree leaned over, and with its last bit of strength, it pushed a branch towards the little bird. The bird grabbed onto the branch with his beak and pulled himself out of the mud. Shaking and exhausted, he flew back to his nest. When he looked back, he saw that the tree was safe and sound, holding on tightly to the big root. A big smile appeared on his face. Although he was soaked and shivering from the cold, he was happy that he had helped the tree. The next morning, the sun shone brightly in the clear blue sky. The birds gathered together and started chirping loudly. Among them was our little bird, who was still shaking a little from the previous day's storm. One bird asked another, "Did you see that huge storm yesterday? I couldn't believe how strong the winds were. I'm glad I stayed in my nest." Another bird said, "Me too. It was the worst storm I've ever seen." Suddenly, one of the birds shouted, "Look, that tree by the river has fallen. I wonder if any birds were brave enough to help it during the storm." The other birds started whispering to each other, discussing who could have been brave enough to help. No one spoke a word. Our little bird, who was listening quietly, suddenly realized that none of the other birds had helped the young tree during the storm. They had all been too scared. Taking a deep breath, he told the other birds about how he saved the tree despite being afraid himself. At first, the other birds didn't believe him. They thought he was making it up. But then he described everything in such detail that the other birds knew he was telling the truth. They were amazed by his bravery. "You saved that tree all by yourself?" they asked. "How did you manage to be so brave when you read the most scaredy-cat bird we know?" The little bird replied, "I was scared, really scared, but the tree needed my help. So I knew I had to try my best." The other birds understood that true bravery wasn't about not being scared, but about doing what's right despite being afraid. From that day on, the other birds never made fun of the little bird again. Instead, they respected him because they realized that he was the bravest bird in the forest. The little bird was still the most timid bird in the forest, and he was still easily startled by loud noises. But he knew that whenever there was trouble, he had to be brave and help those in need. So friends, being brave isn't about being fearless or not getting scared. It's about doing what's right and helping others, even if you're scared. Sometimes the smallest creatures can show the greatest bravery. Just like our little bird. You may feel scared and like you can't do something. But you have to remember that it's not the size that matters, but the courage in your heart. If you liked this story, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Have a great day.